Okay. Somebody give me some reminders. Give me some reminders on what you learned about modernism, probably in literature.
Egotistical savant.
Okay. Not what I think.
Appreciate fragmentation.
Something else.
Alienation.
Alienation, fragmentation. What about that fragmentation part? Emphasize that. Tell me what that means. Let's pretend I've never heard of it. What does that mean?
I just know it's a deep one.
Somebody else.
Lack of emotion, rupture from the past.
Pervasive use of irony.
You all have these really specific terms.
You just memorize the order back on the paper. Desentimentalization. That's the one.
That's why none of us can answer.
We know all these were supposed to say, we just don't know what they mean.
You don't know what any of them.
Hey,
Well, I know some of them.
I didn't even know any of the terms, so.
Speaker using prophetic mode.
Speaker.
Okay, well, listen guys. So much of what you have just said very much ties to modernism in literature, but modernism also applies to society. Usually, if it's a literary theme, not a theme, a literary movement, then it's also a global movement, or a Western movement, or a societal movement. So modernism also has, like most any movement, a beginning, middle, and end. Early modernism doesn't necessarily look like late modernism. Early modernism believes in an upward progression of achievement, we'll say. So man is getting better, and better, and better, and better, and better, and then what happened? Wars, world wars came, and all of a sudden that idea shifted entirely, and people said the exact opposite. Alex and Carter fix whatever his problem. Then that shifted entirely to the opposite and said life is meaningless. And it went into the word that Alex used, fragmentation. All the things that we thought were holding together and meaningful and purposeful and good, people brought a question mark, stuck on the end and said, what if none of that actually works? And then we moved into postmodernism. Post meaning after, modern meaning modern. You know what modern means, current. The problem with postmodernism is what comes after it. How do you get anything after modernism if current is modern? But that's a separate conversation. Instead, looking at modernism, this phrase comes into play. Things fall apart in postmodernism. Fragmentation, as Alex said, they fall apart. And so in postmodernism, we can apply this to literature, economics, society, race, etc., 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 all the things. Faith, food, anything you want. Postmodernism means that things are starting to fall apart. Postmodernism is the anti-worldview. We've had another anti-worldview. Which one was it? Starts with N?
Naturalism.
No. Nihilism.
Nature.
Nihilism is also an anti-worldview because it doesn't give any answers. It only asks questions. Postmodernism very much does that. So that leads us to then question, well, what is postmodernism? Postmodernism is this huge umbrella. Guys, hush, please. Postmodernism is a huge umbrella under which you can stick several things. One of them would be nihilism. Another would be naturalism. Another would be existentialism. All of those things are subsets of postmodernism. I'm going to read a super brief, this is just a few lines, statement from Alice in Wonderland. Everybody knows Alice in Wonderland, the story. You may not have read the original, but this is from it. What happened? There's like a bunny rabbit or something. Anybody? Well, let's do a quick recap. Alice in Wonderland. How is it? What's it about? That's a girl who. Does she actually go places, or she just dreams it? She got hit by a bus. No, not really. She dreamed that she fell in a hole. She dreamed that she took a pill.
It did in the movie.
All that was a dream. She wakes up under the tree.
Remember that part?
Not that she popped out of the wall.
When she woke up from the dream.
She didn't actually fall in the hole.
Okay, I'm going to be the authority in this. She Greenville. So,
That book
Actually
sucks.
read the book.
What?
think about this, guys.
Was it possible to learn about physics?
Think about when we studied nihilism, the question kept coming up. What if you're not actually thinking? What if you just think you're thinking? What if you imagine that you're thinking? What if you appear to be thinking? Alice in Wonderland fits that, yes.
It's modernism has a theme of focusing on the unconscious rather than the conscious.
Okay, absolutely. Then we lead that over into postmodernism, which is a response to all that. Here is the quotation from Alice. At this point in the real book, this is Alice through the Looking Glass, so this is the sequel. She's talking to Humpty Dumpty. Everyone knows who Humpty Dumpty is? Okay. He said, Alice says, I don't know what you mean by the word glory. Apparently, Humpty Dumpty has used the word glory. Grace, turn around. He's used the word glory. She says, I don't know what that word means. He says, I mean, there's a nice knockdown argument for you. And she says, but glory doesn't mean that. Glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument. Humpty Dumpty said, when I use a word, it means just what I choose for it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice, whether you can make words mean so many different things. Well, the question is, said Humpty Dumpty, which is to be master? That's all. This is a direct look into postmodernism. I get to decide what any word means. This right here is lasagna. This is lasagna. Okay? This is a fish. This is a fish. I just get to decide. Why? Because I'm God. That's what he says at the end of the quotation. The real question is, who gets to be master of all? Postmodernism, if you remember what we studied in nihilism, there is no God. So each person gets to be a mini-God. If you get to be a mini-God, there are two things. One is a great appeal to that, and one is a great responsibility to that. The appeal was what? Nihilism, what's the appeal? Existentialism, what's the appeal? You get to decide. I get to decide if this means fish. I'm God. But the great responsibility is for everything. I then have to decide. I have to make meaning out of everything. That is a great start for postmodernism. Let's all take a vote. These, I don't have enough for everybody, so we're going to share. Page 11.
Yeah, I lost my sense of smell. I was also put in the hospital. The J&J. I mean,
Page 11. Guys, focus with me. Postmodernism was born in St. Louis, Missouri on July 15, 1972 at 3:32 p.m. When it was originally built, the Pruitt-Igoe housing project in St. Louis was hailed as a landmark of modern architecture. More importantly, it stood as the epitome of modernity itself in its goal of employing technology to create a utopian society for the benefit of all. But its unimpressed inhabitants vandalized the buildings. Government planners put a lot of effort into attempts to renovate the project, but finally, having sacrificed millions of dollars to the project, the government planners gave up. On that fateful afternoon in mid-July 1972, the building was razed, meaning it was torn down, dynamite, blow up, that sort of thing. According to Charles Jenks, who has been hailed as the single most influential proponent of architectural postmodernism, this event symbolizes the death of modernity and the birth of postmodernity. Anybody heard of Pruitt-Igoe? gov. Pruitt-Igoe is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Anybody ever been to St. Louis? 1, 2, buckle my shoe. St. Louis is a weird city in America. St. Louis I have never been to, but I had a buddy I used to work with who was from St. Louis, and he said the real St. Louis is not the city. Because several years ago, the people of the city picked up and moved out and left behind the ruins in the city. So you've got this weird handicapped actual city and this thriving suburb around it. And we see these pretty pictures of the art and those sorts of things, but we don't necessarily think of St. Louis as a destination city necessarily, that sort of thing. So one of the issues, 1950s, 60s, and now early 70s, that many cities face is housing. Housing especially for the poor. There were neighborhoods, Grayson, I'm going to have to move you or ask you to leave or send Caleb with you, but it's both of you and I keep looking and I've got 2 classes to teach and you can't handle it. So they decided to basically chop down these low-income neighborhoods and build a massive free housing experiment called Pruitt-Igoe. When I say massive, I want to say, I don't remember exactly, I want to say 50 acres. 50 acres of downtown land or near downtown land is significant. They built many high-rises, tons of them, and they were all in very modern architecture. So sleek, straight fronts, bars of windows, not bars on the windows, but straight strips of windows. And they presented it to the neighborhoods like, give up your old housing because you don't have good running water, you don't have a toilet, you don't have a phone, you don't have a yard, and instead we will move you here for free. We will move you here for free. And they felt that this was a good trade-off because we get to cut out those nasty, ugly eyesore neighborhoods, relocate the people who need good housing, give them good housing, and then it didn't take long, it was within the first 7 years that some problems started in Pruitt-Igoe. And people who lived there said, well, there's trash building up in the trash chutes. And if you've ever seen in a high-rise, they have these trash chutes that run the height of the building. So you drop your trash in, it goes all the way down to an incinerator. And they said, we're seeing the trash build up, meaning it has stacked up 32 floors and is now overflowing out into the lobby. And they say, the incinerators are broken, we can't burn the trash anymore. They say, a window's broken and no one repaired it. The doors are broken, we can't lock them anymore. They say a water line bursts and the water is dripping down through floor after floor after floor after floor, which rots the floors. And so there was this tit-for-tat, back-and-forth argument of, we don't have things fixed as they're supposed to, and the building managers are saying, you're not turning it into us to have them fixed the way they're supposed to be done. We can't send in the repairman. You didn't ask for it to be fixed. It goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. There is this big issue, though, always, you know this, of money. The buildings were not built up to code. They were not built quite up to, I shouldn't say up to code, they were not built up to expected plans. So the plans they gave to the community and said, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to be, wasn't actually what they got. And so when mom and dad and 2 kids show up to move into Pruitt-Igoe, it's still at face value better than what they had before, but it doesn't take long to realize that the walls are paper thin. The landscaping we thought we were going to get isn't there. The swing sets we thought we were going to get aren't there. And modern architecture, you know what I'm talking about when I say this, can be depressing. It can be cold. It can look like a prison. So then that argument begins, you've set us up for failure. You've moved us into a place that we don't know how to take care of. We are used to living in filth. We are used to living destitute. We are used to the water running through our homes, not having good sewage, not having a place to throw trash. You've set set us up for failure, and then you blame us when it fails. Whereas the other side is saying, no, we gave you hope. We gave you a better place to live, and you ruined it. Critics of the whole situation stand back and say, see, that's why you can't help the poor. They can't take care of a good thing. This is why we can't have nice things. And at the same time, the other side says, see, they set them up for failure just so they could blame them. You know, it's like Satan's the kind of friend who breaks your leg and then blames you for limping, that sort of thing. And so it never got actually resolved. We still do not know an answer to this. Whose fault, why, how? And in 1972, it tells us, July 15th, it blew up. It said, enough. Between the building and the demolition, it turned into a rat-infested place to deal drugs very quickly. It began about 1955, so it lasted less than 20 years. Less than 20 years. Think of the tons of money that went into building this thing. Like I said, acres and acres and acres. And if you go there now, it's just woods and grass. Nothing. Nothing. Why is this a picture of postmodernity? Because it says there is no answer. There is no answer to the problem. We've talked about different worldviews and a claim to truth. It believes there is a truth or there's not a truth. One of your personal manifesto questions talks about ethics. I want to be kind as I say this, but a number of you gave pretty watered down answers to that question. It was comfortable answers, we'll say it that way. And I wanted to poke in and say that you're not really thinking through this one. You are not thinking through this one. And it's because some of it is not your fault. We, myself included, have grown up in a society and in a time period. And a lot of people don't think through these things. It's just what feels good. I just want to love people. Well, what does that mean, though? How does that look? I just want to let people do what they think is best. But what if they think it's best? What if that's not what's best? And some people want to say, but who are you to say it's not? I'm not saying that I should. I'm just saying, is there a standard somewhere? These are the issues of postmodernism. Let's keep reading. Next paragraph, can you read? Alvaro, our society?
Our society is in the throes of a cultural shift of immense proportions, like the Pruitt Igoe housing project. The evidence that house thought and culture in the modern world is crumbling. As monarchy dies around us, we appear to be entering a new approach,
Postmodernity. The postmodern phenomenon encompasses many dimensions of contemporary society. At the core of them all, however, is an intellectual mood or an outlook. Scholars disagree among themselves as to what postmodernism involves, but they have reached a consensus on one point. This phenomenon marks the end of a single, universal worldview. And we knew that already. Even in this room, even in this school, city, town, all those things, there are lots of different worldviews. It's not like you can say, everybody has the same. No, they don't. The postmodern ethos resists unified, all-encompassing. That's where Alex's word fragmentation comes in. And universally valid explanations. So as soon as a Christian comes in and says, I know what the problem with the world is. It is that we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. A postmodernist says, no. You can't ever make a statement that is true about the whole world. I had a professor in grad school. Somebody said something about a children's book being timeless. And she said, oh no, nothing is timeless. And I wanted to say, sin is. Sin is, it's just as sinful then as it is now and will be. Sin is timeless. But I didn't. Keep reading. Postmodernism likewise entails a rejection of the emphasis on rational discovery. It rejects an emphasis on rational discovery through the scientific method, which provided the intellectual foundation for the modern attempt to construct a better world. At its foundation, then, the postmodern outlook is anti-modern. decide to put that decimal point anywhere I want, does that change the meaning of the paycheck? You better believe it does. But the postmodernists, I think, generally want to say, well, the postmodernists, we don't need to worry about that. But that's not how it works. Either it's everything or nothing in postmodernism. Let's keep reading. The adjective postmodern describes, could you read Grant?
It describes more than an intellectual move, the postmodern rejection of the focus on rationality characteristic of the modern era, finds expression in various dimensions of contemporary society. In recent years, the postmodern mindset has been reflected in many of the traditional vehicles of the cultural expression, including architecture, art, and media. In addition, postmodernism has increasingly become embodied in the broader society. We can detect a shift away from the modern towards the postmodern in pop culture, ranging from the disjointed music videos to the new Star Trek series, and even in the day-to-day aspects of contemporary life, such as the new quest for spirituality in the marketplace and juxtaposing the different styles in the clothes many people wear.
Okay, let's talk about the clothing part for a moment. Most of us look kind of similar because we're at a school where there is something of a dress code. If you look at 1940s fashion in America, there's a certain look for men and a certain look for women. 1920s fashion in America, there's a certain look for women, a certain look for men. 300 years from now, they're going to look back at 2021 and say, woof, men were wearing all kinds of things and women were wearing all kinds of things, and sometimes they overlapped. And then there were the people who didn't really know if they, or didn't want to, or didn't know how to identify within a binary male or female, and so they were wearing both. So that's where part of this is very much a postmodern approach to everything, even fashion. Next paragraph, postmodernism refers, Kate?
Postmodernism is based on intellectual movement and cultural expressions that call into question ideals, principles, and values that identify with modern life. Postmodern modernity in the term of racial emotion.
Epoch.
Epoch. The era in which we are living is a time of postmodern outlook increasingly shapes our society. Postmodernity is the era in which postmodern ideas, attitudes, and values reign, and postmodernism moves with the trend. It is the era of postmodern society.
Our goal in this chapter, yada, yada, yada. Let's think back to, there is a piece of artwork that we talked about that not many people liked. What was the name of it? Huh? Yeah, what was its real name? The urinal.
The fountain.
The fountain?
The fountain.
The Fountain. It was named The Fountain. It was signed, anybody remember the name signed onto it? R. Mutt, M-U-T-T. It was laid on its back side, so it looks a little different angle than what people are used to seeing it. And did the artist actually do anything? He just bought it. Basically signed it, brought it in. And we had people in both classes who said, oh, I just think it's stupid. But there's a lot going on there. Postmodernism takes the bricks and the mortar of a house, and it says, actually, let's start with modernism. Modernism takes the brick and the mortar of a house and says, who says the house has to look like that? What if we rearrange it this way? What if the front door is no longer on the front? What if it has no front door and we put it on the back? Who says it has to have windows? What if it could just all be closed in? I used to work in a middle school that had no exterior windows. This was a 1960s, 1970s postmodern approach to education. And so the room, let's see if I can draw it. The rooms were big, like looking down at the floor plan, you've got this great big room, and they have built an almost full wall. The wall goes up to about here. So I can hear what they're teaching over there, and over there, and over there. And postmodernism says, oh, but it's free-flowing, and we can understand how the other teachers are engaging with their students. Let me tell you what happens. They're screaming, they're screaming, they're screaming, and you're screaming. And you don't get anything done, and you're in no sunlight, because there was no window out to the exterior. So you're in This is postmodernism. That's classic postmodernism, saying, let's just trick around with everything and see what happens. The urinal, the fountains rather, people in these two classes got a little bit frustrated because some people said, and I remember the posts that I read, many people said, this isn't art, this isn't art, this isn't art. Tell me why? Somebody try to defend why it should not be called art.
No purpose.
It doesn't have purpose. I think he had purpose. The artist was Marcel Duchamp. He's a French man. He absolutely was trying to make a statement. That was his purpose. Somebody else. Why should it not be called art? He didn't do anything. But we take things, I don't know what your homes are like, some people take things that they didn't make, they just found and put up on the wall and say, it's art. It's a piece of driftwood. You know, it's a seashell. They didn't make that, and yet we use it as art. Do you have seashells on your wall?
No.
On your coffee table, there you go. Okay. So that's not a very good argument. We could say it's ugly. We could say it's ugly. So art needs to be beautiful. You can make all sorts of these arguments. They're all issues with postmodernism. Here's my big argument. If you don't like the urinal, that's fine. It's a valid statement. If you don't like the urinal, think about what that artist did to art with that urinal. And let yourself realize that that is what people are doing to ethics also. When they say your truth is just as good as my truth. Your urinal is just as good as my Rembrandt. That's the issue. I can paint the Mona Lisa, and that urinal is just as good as it, because your truth is just as good as my truth. And I am an art person. I want there to be some standard. What's the standard of goodness? Is it effort? Is it skill? Is it form, function, color, light, anything? Or can I just rip a urinal off the wall and call it art? With ethics and morals, this is one of your questions that I was a little, they were lackluster. I thought the answers for some of them were lackluster. It's easy to say, I believe there's a right and a wrong. I believe there's a God who has a fixed standard of right and wrong. Those things are okay. As soon as we get into specifics, and I need to hold my ground, we start to get afraid of offending people. My advice to you at the age of 17, 18, 19, wherever you are in the head, you're going to offend people. Just assume it. If you're super conservative, if you're super liberal, doesn't matter. You're going to offend somebody. If you're super religious, you're going to offend somebody. If you're atheistic, you're going to offend somebody. So just plan on it. But the way we speak about our convictions, that can change. I don't need to beat somebody over the head. Did you know you're going to hell? Now, that's not necessary. That's not really necessary. Don't do that. And we've seen that for some time. And I know I have family members, I think, oh, you may be doing more harm to the kingdom of God than you are help right now. But there is also room to stand very firm on convictions that are biblically based and say, I know the culture doesn't like it, but I'm going to stand on it. Let's look at an example. Can you give me something that is wrong today, was wrong 200 years ago, and will be wrong 200 years from now? Murder?
No.
They're saying no.
Stealing.
Why are you saying no?
Because of the past. Like,
I would say, saying that murder has always been wrong.
I would say murder has always been wrong.
He thinks
since
murder's always
being
been wrong.
Since the first murder.
I love that we have this divide on the side over here, and the side over here.
I would love to.
Decide what to do.
look at the particular thing about me.
But you're saying if there was a time or there will be a time when murder is okay.
Yes. When the time that Jesus comes
Say it again.
Like the time that Jesus comes to the earth,
Okay.
saves us all, like the world falls into anarchy.
Okay.
There's no rule and order. Murder's okay.
Okay, let's, murder's a tricky one for this one because murder has these definitions, like Noah just said something about self-defense. I don't know that we would call that
That's not murder.
Thank you. And then he just gave something actually pretty close to that. If you're living in a state of anarchy, the only way you can survive is by killing. I think that's also a form of self-defense. So maybe let's pick another one. I picked a really ugly one. Get ready. This is dark.
I'm ready.
Okay. The sexual molestation of a 3-year-old will always be wrong. 200 years ago it was wrong. Today it's wrong. And 300 years from now, it'll still be wrong. If all of society in the next 300 years says, you know, we were wrong about that thing, that's actually a pretty good option. It'll still be wrong. It will still be wrong. That is one little example that we are pretty comfortable agreeing on. I hope we're all really comfortable agreeing on it. I hope we're all really comfortable on agreeing that that is and always will be wrong. But there are others that we're so hesitant to latch onto. And it's because we're afraid of being wrong. What if I'm wrong in the thing that I feel convictional about? Or what if I hurt people in the process? Or what if I get hurt in the process? That is the act of actually thinking through your convictions. And it takes work. It absolutely takes work. Okay. Last thing, they gave these little mentions. Postmodernity in theater and architecture and art and so forth. We know what it looks like in art. It looks like a urinal. We know what it looks like in theater. What did we see this year that was postmodern theater?
Right.
That is postmodern theater. Okay. When we studied that under nihilism, there was an issue with it though, because I said it can be postmodern, but it can't totally be nihilistic because it still uses a stage, it still uses lights, it still relies on you to buy a ticket to come see that thing. Who would buy a ticket? So that's the issue with postmodern theater. What about architecture? What does postmodern architecture look like? I gave you one example, but we have we can take that out to a further extreme. Just within the past year, one of the most famous postmodern architects died, and I heard Albert Mohler talk about him on the briefing, and he said, this is a man who built buildings with doors that could not open, with stairwells that walked straight into walls. That was his approach to postmodern architecture. So why are you shaking your head, Sam?
It's just a wall.
It's like
It's a wall. It's not really a door.
the wall. The wall. I got that leg
Seen
swing.
that thing where you walk upstairs and go like.
What's the point? That's my question. What's the point?
I don't know.
He's clearly not making the point that this is efficient.
My brain definitely.
It's not save money by building a postmodern house. That's not it, because you bought all these doors that don't open. So what's the point? The point is he's making a statement. He's saying life is meaningless. Architecture is meaningless. That's not true though. For that building to be truly postmodern, it would need no foundation. And if it has no foundation, it cannot stand. The same is true in your life. If you try to choose a fully postmodern approach to living, the honest way to do that is to totally get rid of any foundation in your life. Meaning no family, no friends, no faith, no finances, no physical health. Get rid of all of that, what do you have left? Death. Postmodernism is a self-defeating attempt, in my opinion, at a worldview. Questions, thoughts, ideas? Okay, let me answer this, and we've got just a few minutes before you have to leave, 4 minutes. Especially Christians, if you go to a little country church somewhere in Kernersville and you see some little old woman named Edith, she will have read the news, and she's going to say, "What's the world coming to anyhow?" She's all upset. She's tired of seeing the shootings and the lootings and the da-da-da-da-da. And she's going to say, "What's the world coming to?" The Christian theistic response is, the world is coming to Jesus. Read Colossians. It's not falling apart. It's actually coming more and more and more together in line with a plan for the end of the world. God's plan will be fulfilled. Postmodernism attempts to unravel all of that. That's why we have these, and I want to say they're usually very conservative politicians. It's usually conservative politicians and so forth who are saying, this is not who we are, this is not America, this is not, because they're afraid that things are unraveling. If you see how the news works, for example, it doesn't work. The news does not work anymore. If you see how the economy works, do you know who Bernie Madoff is? He just died last week. Who? Bernie Madoff? Do you not know who Bernie Madoff is? Okay, this is my last note. Even the economy is starting to fall apart because postmodernism erodes it. Bernie Madoff died last week at the age of 81. He is known as he committed the greatest financial fraud scam in America.
Is that the pilot?
Nope.
I saw him video.
Nope. Bernie Madoff was in New York City. He did a Ponzi scheme. If you don't know what a Ponzi scheme is, basically Christina is giving me her money to invest. I am her investment guy. She's giving me her money. Peyton gives me her money, and rather than investing it, I just take the portion of it, give it back to Christina, and say, "Look how much of a return you got." When in fact, it's just her money. But I don't tell her that. And I need it to keep working, and so Noah gives me his money, and I give a little bit of his back to Peyton. I say, "Look how much of a return you got." It just keeps building and building and building. Now what happens in the meantime? Word spreads, Zach Roberts is doing some crazy good investing. You better invest with him too. The money keeps coming in, and as long as the money's coming in, it works. It works. But nothing's invested. It's just shuffled. How does it fall apart? 2008, the economy tanks. People stop investing. Peyton says, "I want my money back." Lindsay says, "I want my money back." Christina, "I want my money back." And then Bernie Madoff says, "I don't have any money to give anybody." How much did he lose? $50 billion.
Why would he stop like $1 billion?
Huh?
People get greedy.
He would have fine.
Oh, man, was
But how much money did he make in time?
How much did he make? I don't know. His son, I just read, I think his son's worth $230 million. Anyhow, he was sentenced to 150 years in jail. He died in jail at the age of 81. And it still raises this big question. What is happening right now with investments that we have no idea about? And they could ruin us. They could ruin not just individuals, but they could ruin our American economy. It's scary. Guys, y'all dismissed.